people talk a lot about their partner gaslighting them. And yes, that happens. But let's also talk about the self-gaslighting that we can do to ourselves before we even give our partner a chance to respond to us. We silence ourselves. We shut ourselves down so quickly. And the minute we feel some feeling or need bubbling up inside, we tamp that back down and we expect ourselves to play small in this relationship.
Welcome to Season of Stuck, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the all-too-human experience of feeling stuck. I'm your host, Deanna, deBara, and on this podcast, we explore all things stuck. How and why stuckness happens, what it feels like, how to learn and grow from it, and ultimately, how to get unstuck and move forward in an authentic, empowered way. If you are looking for insights, support, and community as you make your journey from stuck to unstuck, you're in the right place. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Season of Stuck. For those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Deanna. I'm your host, and I could not be any happier that you're here. And if you are not new here, welcome back. I could not be any happier that you continue to be here. So thank you for tuning in. So today we are going to talk about an area I can pretty confidently say that we all get stuck in at some point. And for some of us, many, many points. And that is relationships. In my opinion, relationships are the most important thing in life. Being in relationship with others gives us a sense of belonging, joy, acceptance, companionship, the feeling of being seen and understood. It's like all of the good stuff in life. And while all relationships are important, arguably one of, if not the most important and impactful, is our romantic relationships. Who you choose as a partner is huge. They are the person that you spend your day-to-day with. They're the person you cultivate intimacy with, physical or otherwise. They're the person you spend the most time with. And in the case of marriages and other long-term partnerships, they're the person you ultimately walk through your life with. They play a major role in everything from your psychological and emotional well-being, to your physical health, to your financial security. The list goes on and on. And the impact that relationship has on your life will depend on who you choose as a partner and how each of you shows up or doesn't show up in that partnership. Now, to be clear, there is no such thing as a perfect relationship. Every relationship has its own challenges, and every person has their own challenging traits that they bring to the relationship. But it's how committed each person is to working through the challenges of the relationship, as well as the challenge of not only the other person, but of themselves, that determine how supportive and fulfilling the partnership is for everyone involved. In a healthy relationship, both partners show up equally. But things can take a turn when one partner shows up in a more significant way than the other. Now, don't get me wrong. There is no such thing as a true 50-50 relationship 100% of the time. In even the healthiest of relationships, there will be times when one partner carries more of the relationship load than the other. For example, you and your partner might generally split chores pretty much down the middle. But if they're having a super busy week and they have to work late, you might pick up the slack. Or if you are going through something hard, you might need your partner to support you more than you're able to support them in that moment. And that is totally fine. But what is not totally fine is when that imbalance becomes a foundational part of the relationship, with one partner continually giving and the other taking but never giving back. I am very familiar with this relationship dynamic, thanks to the dismal landscape that was my dating life in my 20s. At that time, I really struggled with feelings of self-worth. I was newly sober, still figuring out what my life was going to look like, and deep down, I didn't really believe that I had anything to offer in a relationship. And so, because I didn't truly believe that I was worthy of love and support and effort from a partner, I ended up attracting people who reinforced that idea. In these relationships, the person I was dating would show me pretty quickly that they weren't really available, able, or willing to put in the work necessary to build a real reciprocal relationship. But instead of walking away when they revealed that, which is 100% what I would do now, I took their lack of effort and engagement as something that I was doing wrong. I would think, well, maybe if I show them enough love or do enough things for them or try hard enough, they will start trying too. But inevitably, the more I tried, the less they did. And it would leave me feeling confused, frustrated, and angry until I eventually got fed up enough and left. It was an exhausting way to exist in relationships. And while I didn't have a name for it then, I do now. And that is thanks to today's guest, Dr. Ashley Southard. Dr. Ashley is a therapist who specializes in helping overfunctioning women in relationships. Her definition of overfunctioning in love is to do for them what they can and should be doing for themselves, to carry far too much of the relational load, and to wonder if you're asking for too much when the truth is you're asking for too little. As I explained, that was definitely me in some of my earlier relationships. And oh, how I wish I had Dr. Ashley's work back when I was unpacking and recovering from my own overfunctioning tendencies. It would have saved me an incredible amount of time, energy, and a whole lot of money in therapy bills. Even though overfunctioning isn't the current reality of my partnership, I was still really interested to learn more about this relationship dynamic and why exactly I showed up in this way in my past relationships. And wow, did I learn a ton. During our conversation, Dr. Ashley and I take a deep dive into the overfunctioning and underfunctioning relationship dynamic, including what overfunctioning in a relationship looks like and the common ways it can play out, what drives the tendency to overfunction in relationships, why overfunctioning is particularly common in women, and how to take a step back from overfunctioning, choose yourself, and get the love and support you want, need, and deserve, even if that means moving on from a relationship. Let's jump into my conversation with Dr. Ashley. Dr. Ashley, welcome to Season of Stuck. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for our chat today.
I am so excited for our chat today. The work that you do and the relationship dynamics that you explore, I feel like is such a stuck spot for so many people, including me at certain points in my life. So I am very excited to learn more about this dynamic, where it comes from, how it gets us stuck.
Yeah.
But I guess to kick things off, I would love if you could introduce yourself to listeners and tell us a little bit about what inspires your work and a little bit more about your work in overfunctioning.
Absolutely. So my name is Dr. Ashley Southard, and I have been a clinical therapist for over 20 years. I specialize in marriage and family therapy. I've been working with individuals, couples, families, and groups for a very long time. And we've always had a passion for understanding relationship dynamics and what is going on between people. And so that's kind of the professional side of my work. And then I have a personal story that folds into that as well, where I too was once an overfunctioning woman and found myself really stuck in a one-sided relationship that was draining me dry. And I started diving into my own side of that dynamic, trying to make sense out of it, and stumbled upon a really incredible healing process that helped me get unstuck. So I have merged that with my professional expertise as a clinical therapist, and I'm trying to, just help other women who maybe are stuck in a similar dynamic make sense out of it, because it can be really confusing, and start to reconnect with their personal power and understand that there's always choices and that we can make brave decisions to steer ourselves in the direction of what's going to make us feel great in our own lives. That's what we all deserve. So that's what I'm here to do.
I love that you mentioned choices, because I feel like when you're stuck, it can be really hard to see that there are choices ahead of you and that there's different paths that you can take. But seeing those choices and just making one to move forward is like the key to getting unstuck. So I love that you frame your work in that way.
Yeah. And it's also one of the hardest parts of the process for most of us. And so breaking it down so that we can understand what's going on. We can make sense out of our own feelings. I think that's where we connect with our power to then be able to make choices that get us unstuck.
I cannot wait to dig into that. But before we get too deep into this relationship dynamic, for people who aren't familiar with this work and with what it means to be an overfunctioning woman, from your perspective and experience, like what does that actually mean? Like what does it mean to be an overfunctioning woman in a relationship?
Yeah. So the way that I see it, the overfunctioning woman in love, she is in a one-sided relationship dynamic where she is doing for them what they can and should be doing for themselves. She is carrying the bulk of the relationship load, working really hard to try to keep the relationship connected and close. And along the way, her feelings of love and care and compassion are slowly turning into resentment, anger, loneliness, and eventually burnout. The traits of overfunctioning are overgiving, over accommodating, overthinking about them, being overly flexible. And if we take out the over, those are really beautiful things. We need to be giving. We need to be accommodating. We need to be flexible in our relationship. So I like this word because it creates space to honor the beautiful intention and the beautiful desire behind the behavior. But when those behaviors and ways of showing up in love are met without reciprocity, then it can turn these beautiful traits into something that ends up creating a really unfulfilling dynamic and sends your system into overdrive and then complete exhaustion and burnout.
I realize that this is a very, very broad question that does not have a singular answer, but why do people overfunction in relationships? Like, what is driving that behavior?
Yeah, that's a big question. We could spend a long time talking about that. So the therapist in me looks at it from this psychological perspective, and my theoretical orientation is rooted in attachment theory and really understanding how the early years of our life really shape our understanding of ourselves and shape our understanding of how relationships work. So when we look at overfunctioning, it is a pattern of behaving, thinking, and feeling in our love relationship, but it didn't start here. For most people, it starts earlier in life where we are learning these patterns with our parents. Because what we do with our parents will very naturally become what we tend to do with our partner, unless we, become aware of that and want to do something different and show up differently. And so I travel back in time with my clients and we look at these early years and where did you learn that you need to overgive? Where did you learn that it was your responsibility to take care of them rather than being allowed to be the child and be taken care of? So oftentimes in the history of the overfunctioning woman's childhood, we see some dynamics with their caregivers where they felt responsible for their parent or caregiver's feelings, for not being a burden, not being too much, not having too many needs, not causing too much stress. And whether that was the intention of the parent or not, that was the experience and the perception of the child. And that's really what matters, right? That's what we're working with. So I think that's the bulk of where overfunctioning begins. And it creates this deep crack in your sense of self-worth, that what you want and what you need, you actually can't have because you don't deserve it. And it sets into motion these really painful beliefs that if you want something, you're asking too much. If you need something, you're being a burden. And so part of overfunctioning is trying to play small and smaller and smaller so that you're not burdening your partner, you're not inconveniencing them, but eventually you get so small that there's really nothing left of yourself. So a lot of this is self-worth. A lot of this is related to childhood experiences. I think when we come into the present focus in our relationship, we also want to appreciate that I'm talking about overfunctioning in love, and I don't know anybody who gets into a love relationship and doesn't want it to work out. And so the stakes are high. And so we want to do anything we possibly can to try to make this relationship work. And part of the mindset of the overfunctioning woman is maybe if I just do a little bit more, then it will get better. Maybe if I just give them a little bit more, then they'll realize what they're doing or how I'm feeling or what I'm needing, right? Maybe if I role model for them a little bit more how to be a loving partner, then they'll start to reciprocate that. And so we dupe ourselves into believing that maybe a little bit more on our part will effect the change that we're looking for. It will get the connection we're so desperately wanting. But that sets into motion a trap where a lot of time passes by. And eventually we find ourselves stuck in this, pattern and this belief that maybe a little bit more on our part will change things. And then certainly there's life circumstances. It's not easy to walk away from a love relationship if that's the choice you're contemplating. And it's even more complicated if there are other factors like children involved. So there's a lot of reasons why we get stuck in overfunctioning, but those are some of the heavy hitters.
So, like everything, it's so interesting and frustrating that when you really peel back the layers, it all goes back to our early childhood experiences. And so it sounds like overfunctioning is a different way of modeling our first experiences of being in relationship, which can be with a parent, caregiver. And I know that you talk a lot about the overfunctioning woman. From your perspective, why is this dynamic of overfunctioning? Why does it tend to be more common with women?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it pulls upon a lot of the traits that women naturally enjoy bringing to a relationship. Like I said, it starts out in a really beautiful way, but then we overdo these traits and that becomes overfunctioning. Now, I want to acknowledge here that I am not saying that these are traits that men don't bring into a relationship, but I do think that women, our culture promotes these dynamics, these traits inside of us a lot more than maybe our culture promotes them in men. And so we try to be more considerate, more compassionate, more empathic, more patient, more forgiving, all of these things that we know can support a relationship. But again, if they get paired with a partner who's not reciprocating an appropriate level of those traits, then you end up trying to compensate for them. And then you're doing a lot of that. And I think this overfunctioning shows up more for women because it's what we do best. And then we kind of take it to an extreme when we're not getting it in return.
So I'm curious about how this dynamic actually plays out. So when you have an overfunctioning person who's partnered with an underfunctioning person, at least in terms of relationship,
Right.
what does that look like? How are these two people relating to each other? I know you said the overfunctioning person is doing more, but kind of like specifically, how is that push and pull?
Yeah. So I kind of think of it like a teeter totter on a playground. And it's this balancing act. It's maybe unfulfilling, but it is a functional balancing act, if you will. So think of it too as like a cycle. So if I am giving and then the other person isn't reciprocating, then they're taking, right? So then I think, okay, let me give more and maybe that will change things. And then they take more. So it becomes very reinforcing. As you give more, it reinforces them to take more. And as they take more, it reinforces you to give more. And, it doesn't start out this way, or at least it doesn't start out feeling bad because at the beginning of a relationship, it feels so good to give and you don't have a painful history with this person yet. And so you're happy to give, you're happy to shower them with all of these wonderful things. And if they're not able to return it in the ways that are meaningful to you, it's kind of like you have this reserve of patience and understanding and compassion, and you know their history and you know why it's hard for them, and you can give a lot of passes. But as time wears on and you continue to not get what you want and need, then slowly that patience and compassion wears thin. But again, remember the mindset of the overfunctioning woman is maybe if I do more, that will get them to engage. And that's the trap because it doesn't get them to engage. The more that you do, it just reinforces that the less they can do. And the less that they do reinforces the more that you need to do. And round and round and round you go. And if you stop doing more and they don't pick up the slack and they don't fill the gap, what's going to happen?
So it sounds like it is a loop that the overfunctioning person is give, give, give. The underfunctioner is take, take, take. And then it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that the overfunctioner thinks, well, if I just up things a little bit more, if I just give or love or support a little bit more, they're going to notice and they're going to be so grateful that they want to do the same for me. But that's not actually what is being reinforced.
Right. Now, if we want to complicate things a little bit more, being a couples therapist, I've talked with partners on both sides of this cycle. And when I talk with an underfunctioning partner, a lot of times they'll say, but I am giving. I am trying to contribute to this relationship. And so we have to appreciate that there is a difference in perception here. That just because you're not experiencing them as giving doesn't mean that they aren't trying to give. And maybe they're not giving in ways that are meaningful to you. So I do want to acknowledge that. But oftentimes what we also have to look at is the overfunctioning woman is not the best receiver. She's very, very good at giving, but she's not very good. And I was totally guilty of this, not very good at receiving the same level of attention, care, compassion, resources, whatever it might be. So sometimes earlier in that dynamic, the other partner is trying to give and it's hard to receive that. And so then they think, well, why bother, right? She's not going to receive it or accept it anyway. So then they back down on their efforts. So that can also contribute to this entrenched dynamic that eventually does look and feel like give, 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 take, take, take.
I have absolutely played out this dynamic at certain points in certain relationships. And it's so true what you said about how in the beginning, it just feels so good to be super loving and super supportive. And, at the beginning, I would imagine that oftentimes underfunctioners are also giving somewhat of the same because the beginning is that, honeymoon phase and everybody is just lovey-dovey. But then it's like over time, your cup gets drained. And in a relationship with anyone, whether it's romantic, friendship, there needs to be a reciprocity when as you give, they give to you and you fill back up your cup. And it sounds like this dynamic is really just draining the overfunctioning person who has a lot to give, who has a lot of stores to show that love and compassion. But my guess is that there is a certain point where that cup is drained and there is no more left to give.
Yeah. So I think there's a process that the overfunctioning woman goes through in this relationship where she goes to her partner and she tries to express what it is that she's feeling. She tries to express what it is that she's needing. And most of the time she gets met with defensiveness, dismissiveness, denial, blame, silent treatment, whatever version of a brick wall she hits. And, she's left feeling like what she's saying, what she's feeling, what she's needing doesn't matter to her partner. And her partner doesn't want to take these in, doesn't want to work with her to make this relationship feel more fulfilling. And, earlier on in that process, she might feel really sad by that, kind of retreat, and then within herself think, okay, what's a better way that I can bring this up? How can I do it in a way that won't trigger them? Or how can I do it in a way that maybe they'll hear it better? Or how can I give more to them so that then they'll be able and willing to hear me when I want something? So then she goes back and she tries this new strategy, this new technique, this new approach, thinking maybe this will be the thing that really gets them to hear me. And again, she hits that brick wall of defensiveness or blame or denial or turning it around on her and somehow it's her fault. And she goes through this process over and over and over thousands of times, years, decades of trying to communicate her experience in this relationship and feeling like her partner really doesn't care to hear this. And it's painful. And, the reality is our heart can only do that so many times before we simply can't do it anymore. And then we get empowered and we say, I won't do this anymore.
There are so many different ways to go from stuck to unstuck. But one of the most productive, learning. Learning something new can help you expand your skill set and find new interest. And in the process, help you get unstuck. And if you want to learn something new, you will definitely want to check out Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers thousands of classes designed to help you learn grow, and tap into your creativity, all of which can help you make the journey from stuck to unstuck. And right now, Skillshare is offering a free month to new members. If you want to access Skillshare's entire library of classes and get the education and instruction you need to shake off the stuckness, just visit seasonofstuck.com/Skillshare and sign up for your free trial today. Again, that's seasonofstuck.com/Skillshare. Touching on the emotional experience, like you said, it can be really painful, but what are some of the emotions that tend to go hand in hand for this? I can speak for myself that when I have been in this dynamic, it has made me feel like I am not worth showing that love and that attention and that compassion that I feel like I'm bringing to the relationship. It has made me feel frustrated, like nothing that I am doing is working. It's made me feel kind of out of control because my best efforts, I'm not getting the outcome that I want. And it also is very lonely.
Very lonely.
Being in a relationship where it is, you feel like you're giving, and you're not getting in return is an incredibly lonely experience. And in my opinion, I don't know if there's anything worse than feeling lonely when you are with the person that is supposed to love you the most.
That's right. Yeah, it's really wounding to our soul, right? To think that we have this person to go through life with together and then to keep having these experiences where we're left feeling like, no, I actually don't have them to go through life together. I mean, maybe we're living together, maybe we're paying the bills together, maybe we share kids together. But when I really need them, when I'm feeling something, when I'm needing something, they're not there for me. And that crushes us. You know, humans are pack animals. We are wired to connect. We are wired to be together in community. And when we've chosen this one special person to have the closest space in our life and in our heart, and they don't take that seriously, like that's gut wrenching. So yes, it's an incredibly lonely space. I think it can be, very angering. It can be very hurtful. I think it also can be very, very confusing. And this is one of the pieces I really try to tease out for people because it's not how you would show up. It's not how you show up in love. You're so considerate. You're so thoughtful of them and their needs and their experience almost too much, right? That you can kind of lose focus of yourself. But it's so confusing then how they can show up so differently. It feels so selfish. It feels so inconsiderate. It feels so immature. And you can't even wrap your head around it. So I think the confusion is a really big emotional space for a lot of women. And then the resentment. The resentment is huge. The anger, the rage that can seethe under the surface as, she has given her emotions, her heart, her energy, her time, and really feels like she's getting nothing in return. There's another sneaky emotion that's really common for the overfunctioning woman, and that is guilt. A huge amount of guilt. And often that's what drives so much of the overfunctioning. So it is a smattering of a lot of really intense emotions. And I think it can feel like this huge emotional swirl, which also can be why people get stuck because it's overwhelming to feel all of this. And if people aren't talking about it in a way that's helpful, and if they're not helping you make sense out of it, you kind of just get overwhelmed and shut it down and just keep on going.
Thank you for bringing up the guilt part of it because I can only speak for myself, but it sounds like this might be an element of the dynamic. But oftentimes, it is easier for me to turn things around on myself and to just focus on what I'm not doing or how I'm falling short rather than be angry or upset or disappointed in another person. And so when I've played out this dynamic in the past, there was resentment and there was anger, but a lot of it was just kind of ruminating on what I'm doing wrong, how I'm not showing up, why I'm not enough to deserve that. So thank you for bringing that up because
Exactly.
I don't think that that's an emotion a lot of people might associate with this.
Right. And that really is rooted in what we were talking about before, where overfunctioning is driven by low self worth. The sense that you don't deserve to have space in this relationship for your needs or for your feelings. You don't deserve their time, attention, energy, or resources. You don't deserve to be an inconvenience to them. And for most people, that's going to be rooted in earlier life experiences where that was your dynamic with a caregiver in some way. And you learned early on that you don't deserve those things. And so you carry that forward into this relationship. And then guilt is the manifestation of, I don't deserve this, right? And if I even so much as admit that I have a need in this relationship, I silence myself with guilt. So, people talk a lot about their partner gaslighting them. And yes, that happens. But let's also talk about the self gaslighting that we can do to ourselves before we even give our partner a chance to respond to us, right? We silence ourselves. We shut ourselves down so quickly. And the minute we feel some feeling or need bubbling up inside, we tamp that back down and we expect ourselves to play small in this relationship. And a lot of that is guilt for wanting anything, which is rooted in, I don't deserve anything.
You use the word overwhelming. And I think that that is like the perfect umbrella term for how, because this is a very intense dynamic and a very like layered experience. And that can feel extremely overwhelming. And to your point, that overwhelm can almost shut you down from doing anything because it feels so big. And where do you start? And how do I untangle all of this? So you just stay where you are. But what does the healing process look like? Like, how, if a person finds himself in a dynamic where they are over functioning and they're with a partner that is not meeting them in the way that they show up, how do they heal that dynamic, not just for the relationship, not just how they fix the relationship, but how do they heal that drive within themselves?
Yeah, and it is individual work primarily because, we can't single-handedly change the relationship. So when we heal ourselves, then we heal our side of the dynamic, and then we see what our partner chooses to do with that, right? And if they choose to do their healing work. So I would say the first step in the healing process is becoming aware of how overfunctioning shows up for you, because we can't change something that we don't see. And so I really like to help women become aware of what is overfunctioning and what are all of the ways that it can show up. There's physical overfunctioning, there's mental overfunctioning, emotional overfunctioning, sexual overfunctioning, financial overfunctioning. There's a lot of ways that we will carry far too much of the load in the relationship. So becoming really aware of that, taking inventory of that is really necessary. And it will feel overwhelming because overfunctioning is insidious. It gets into every little nook and cranny of the relationship dynamic. You don't do it in some areas and not in others. So, really kind of taking a soulful inventory of that, I think is key. And then the next piece is to start practicing stepping back. If overfunctioning is doing too much and believing that more is better, then the antidote and the solution is to do less, to step back from functioning so much. Now, that sounds really simple, and it is a simple concept, but it is anything but easy because stepping back is now going to bump up against all of this deep psychology, right? This self-worth, the guilt, the fear. And the greatest fear for the overfunctioning woman is if I step back and they don't step up, then it all falls apart. And then what? And now we're confronting the deepest fears of being alone, feeling abandoned, feeling rejected, feeling not good enough, feeling like we're not worthy, we're not deserving of them to step up and do their part. And so our journey really is this deep excavation of these deep-seated beliefs that we hold within ourselves about our worth and our value. And that's where, we look into doing individual therapy. We look at these deeply held beliefs that probably come from childhood about what we're worthy of, what we're deserving of. And that's what empowers us as we heal those wounds. That's what empowers us to be brave and step back and say, you know what? I deserve a partnership. I will do my fair share and I expect them to do their fair share. And they have a right to decide not to. They have a right to continue to underfunction. Should they choose that, I will make self-respecting choices for myself because I know that I will be okay. I've got my own back. I will be okay. Whether I'm with them or not with them, I'm going to be okay. And that's what then empowers us to be able to step back and hold those limits and hold those standards and be brave enough to see what our partner chooses to do with that. Because in some situations, they will step up. Unfortunately, in a lot of situations that I've seen, they don't. And, the overfunctioning woman is tasked with really making those brave choices that work for her.
And that process of letting go and taking a step back and giving your partner space to either meet you or not meet you, I feel like that can feel so scary because there is an element of when you are over functioning, you are to a certain extent in control. Maybe you're disappointed, maybe you wish that they would do more, but you have a sense of control in moving the relationship forward because you are the one showing up and you are the one doing it. So stepping back feels like that would be just really scary.
It is terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. And you hit the nail on the head. It really is handing over the reins that they should have been holding the whole time. But when they didn't hold them, you were like, oh, I'll pick those up for you. I'll hold them. And now you're giving them back and you're taking the greatest risk because you don't know what they're going to do with that. But to keep holding their reins, to keep doing their work, to keep bridging the gap is just going to perpetuate the problem. And so it is terrifying to take that step back and really let your partner decide what they're going to do with this space. Are they going to step up or not? And I think for a lot of women, you don't realize how resourceful and courageous you really are until you start walking through that really scary space. And so you just, at some point, you make the terrifying decision to step back and see what happens.
And I mean, thinking back on my life, honestly, the decisions that felt the most terrifying in the moment and the most emotionally vulnerable and, kind of taking a step into the unknown are also the ones that ended up being the most gratifying, the most supportive, the ones that carried me onto the next version of myself in my life.
That's exactly right. And that's what we have to remember. I think this is what I call the self-restoration process, is about coming back to yourself, your courage, your confidence, trusting yourself, believing in yourself. And when we live from that place, then we can trust that we are going to be okay. We are our own safety net. Do I want this relationship to work out? Do I want my partner to pick up their fair share of the load? Do I want them to bridge this gap? Absolutely. That's my hope. And if they don't, my heart will be broken. I will be devastated. All the dreams that I had for what our future could be, right, are going to be shattered. And yet I'm going to get through that because I can usher myself through hard things. And through hard things, I'm going to meet the next level of myself. And she's amazing. And out of these ashes, I will rise and I will make something great of this. And when we can live from that place, we can do hard things, we can make brave choices, and we can trust that it's not only going to be okay, it's going to be outstanding.
And that work is so important to do, whether the relationship works out or not, because there's a saying that I've heard, which is like, we accept the love that we think that we deserve. And coming from a place where you haven't healed that and you don't have your confidence and your trust in yourself that you can not overfunction and still get what you want and need from a relationship, like, I'm sure that drives the dynamic of like choosing partners who may not function in the way that we need them to.
Exactly. Yeah. So to the degree that you're over functioning, you actually need a partner who is under functioning to the same degree. You don't know that consciously, but subconsciously in your psyche, that's what's going on. So if you don't do this healing work and you leave this relationship, guess what? You're going to find a new person who's going to look very different, maybe living life very differently, and on the surface feels like a totally different person than your ex. And yet they're probably going to be underfunctioning to the degree that you're overfunctioning because you haven't healed that wound inside that says, I don't have to work so hard to be loved. I don't have to play small in order to have some space in this relationship. I don't have to always accommodate them. They can accommodate me. Right. So that healing work within yourself is imperative because if you don't do it, you're going to find yourself in another overfunctioning, underfunctioning dynamic and feel really unfulfilled. And then unfortunately, it's a slippery slope into more self-blame, more self-doubt, more self-gaslighting. What's wrong with me? See, this person won't give me what I need either. I really must not be deserving.
You are describing the entirety of my 20s. And it's interesting. I started committing more to therapy during my 20s and trying to unwind all of these things. And I did a lot of work. And when I met my now husband, it was when I realized, like, it brought to life all of the work that I had done because I was replaying that same dynamic just with different people, rinse and repeat. And when I met my husband and we progressed in our relationship and he showed up as a true partner in a way that no one else ever had, it was like an indicator to me that, like, oh, I have healed something in me if this is a relationship that I'm now participating in.
That's right, because you believe that you deserve a partner who reciprocates. You believe that you're worthy of their time, attention, energy, and resources. And so you subconsciously are going to attract a partner who wants to give you that. You probably also really developed your ability to receive without guilt or without pushing it away or shutting it down. So a very basic example of that is if someone compliments you, it's the difference between saying thank you and taking that in or rejecting the compliment with some joke about, oh, this old shirt, right? And so when we really heal those wounds around self-worth and what we deserve in our relationships, then we're able to open up to a partner who wants to be a partner in a relationship, not someone who's looking for you to take care of them and be a mom to them.
This is a little bit of an aside, but I'm curious, in your work, have you found that people that overfunction in their romantic relationships, does that dynamic also play out in other relationships in their life?
Yeah, it does tend to play out. And so a lot of women will see this show up in their relationships at work, where they're overfunctioning at work, maybe in parenting their children, where they're doing more for their kids than is developmentally appropriate. It could be in friendships. It could be in community relationships, where maybe you're volunteering or you're a leader in something in your community. And the reason why this will show up in other areas of life is, again, because at the root of it is your sense of self-worth and what you believe you deserve. And we take that with us everywhere we go. And so when we are at work, we're still operating from our beliefs around self-worth. When we are volunteering in our community, we're still operating from our beliefs of self-worth. The reason why I focus on the love relationship is because it tends to be our closest relationship, where these early childhood strategies and attachment styles are most activated and most intense. So this is where we're relying on someone the most. They're seeing the most vulnerable side of us. We need them the most. They trigger us the most. So if we can master this dynamic in our love relationship and we can overcome our overfunctioning in that space, then it will have a beautiful generalizing effect out into these other areas like work and parenting and the community, where we can start to show up in a more balanced way.
So it's like the domino effect, like tackling it in your love
Exactly.
relationship then will hit all of the other ways that you relate to people in your life.
Yeah. But having said that, if you're working on the healing aspects of this and wanting to become aware and practice stepping back, sometimes it can feel a little easier or a little more confidence boosting to practice some of those skills earlier on in relationships that maybe feel like the stakes aren't as high. So maybe it is easier to start practicing some boundaries and standards and using your voice when it comes to your volunteer commitments. And then building, that sense of like, oh, maybe I can do this, and then bringing that into your partnership. So we can use it to our advantage, but certainly as we master that in our love relationship, we will naturally see those effects play out outside of that.
So, for anyone who is listening to this conversation and are recognizing, oh, this is the dynamic of my relationship. This is where I am stuck. I am overfunctioning and my partner is underfunctioning. What advice would you give that person to take a step in a new direction or take a step towards becoming unstuck in their relationship?
Yeah. So I would say to start really becoming aware of where you overfunction. And if anyone wants some more specifics, if they go to my website, which is drashleysouthard.com, I have a free quiz on there with a lot of questions about different ways of overfunctioning. So it's a really great way to start to assess how you might overfunction. And then I would say just pick one of those things that feels relatively doable. It's going to be a little anxiety provoking. It'll probably trigger some guilt to play around with it and step back, but pick one and see if you can start doing it a little bit less and see what that's like for you. And as you do that, become very aware of what are the feelings that are coming up for you as you're trying to step back. What are the thoughts that are racing through your mind? Because those are going to be the subconscious beliefs that will need to get worked on. And what are the urges that you have when you start to feel those things and think those things, right? So becoming very self-aware of what your pattern is. So much of overfunctioning is over-focusing on your partner and analyzing their pattern and analyzing their childhood and their feelings and their inner world, right? You have like this honorary degree in psychology of your partner. You want to be crystal clear on your experience and your inner world of your overfunctioning. So I would encourage people to spend time really observing themselves and their process. And then, whatever sources of support. As a therapist, I'm a big fan of therapy, but certainly there's a lot of ways that we can go through personal growth. Really starting to work on shifting those thoughts and those behaviors, which will then shift the feelings and decrease the anxiety, the guilt, the confusion, and all of that.
So it really starts with awareness and letting go of a desire to control your partner and almost like force them to step up, and instead turn that inward and recognize your own patterns and how they're not serving you, and then make those changes.
Exactly, because people change when they're ready to change, not when we're ready for them to change. And so, your partner's on their own journey and they may be ready to change and they may not be. So you've really got to kind of step back from their timeline for themselves and refocus on your timeline for yourself. And what do you need? How is this relationship feeling for you? What do you want to do with that?
I feel like one of the most valuable lessons in life is that you cannot control anyone but yourself.
That's right. Yeah. And that's a really hard pill to swallow, right? Especially when the stakes are high.
Well, because then it puts the onus on you, and that can feel, as we talked about, a little scary. So we touched on this a bit, but someone's feeling stuck in their relationship. They realize they're overfunctioning and with an underfunctioning partner. They do the healing work, and that healing work is important regardless of how the relationship plays out.
Right.
But as they're doing that work, like at what point does getting unstuck mean walking away from the relationship? Like what indicators, as someone is doing their own healing work, should they kind of be on the lookout for that maybe this relationship isn't the right relationship and the best way to get unstuck is to move on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's probably one of the most common questions that I get. And it's hard to answer because, of course, it's such a unique process and experience and timeline for each person. And your limits might be different than my limits, right? And what feels doable might be different for us. So, but in general, what I would say, what I see most often is you have been doing your own personal growth work. You have been stepping back. You have been upping your standards. You have been making brave decisions to decide that you do deserve more. You do deserve better. And you've been making that known to your partner, right? So we wouldn't want to necessarily walk away without verbalizing all of that and really giving the relationship a fair chance at change. But what I have found with overfunctioning women is they have said that till they're blue in the face and they're not really getting much of a response. So you've done a lot of your work. Not that our work is ever complete, but you've done a fair amount. You're no longer over functioning. You're no longer playing small. Nothing is changing. That might be an indicator that it's time to start to reconsider if this relationship is right for you. Another one is if you feel like your flame in this relationship has burnt out for you. And what I mean by that is your heart is done. Your mind isn't done. You want this to work. You don't want the family to be broken up. You don't want to say goodbye to decades of marriage, whatever all of the very valid reasons are. But as much as your mind wants to stay in the game, your heart is done. And I think most people know what I'm talking about, that feeling inside, where even if their partner was to start doing all the things, it just wouldn't really make a difference. So out of respect to yourself and the relationship, that would probably be an indicator. And couples therapy research has shown that when a female partner in a heterosexual relationship where this is the dynamic, when she has hit that point, is kind of the point of no return, that even the best couples therapy cannot resurrect her feelings for her partner in the way that she wants them to be, those loving, compassionate, patient, respectful feelings. They're gone. So that would also be another indicator to really consider if this is the relationship for you. Another one, and I ask this of my clients, I know you love your partner, but do you respect your partner? And that's powerful because we can love them, but do we respect them? And when respect starts to leave a relationship, that's a dangerous place, right? On either end. So really looking at, do you respect your partner? If you were to meet them today, would you want to settle down with them? Are your values aligned? Do you guys see things the same way? Because here's the thing, as you do your personal growth work, as you do your self-restoration work and you evolve yourself out of overfunctioning, what you want in a relationship is going to change because, you deserve what you want. And so who they are and what they offer really may not be a match for the person you're evolving into today. So there's a lot of things to look at. And then I certainly want to give the answer of if there's any type of violence, abuse, elements of unsafety towards you, towards the kids, that certainly would be another instance in which reconsidering if this relationship is for you.
That tool is so powerful to ask yourself, if I were to meet this person today, is this a relationship that I would want to get into? Because I think so often, so many of us hold on to things, including relationships, but also friendships or, career choices that are suited for the person that you used to be, but are just not a fit for the person that you have become. And that is just such a powerful way to evaluate a relationship. Does this relationship suit me as I am today?
Yeah. And the reality is, and this is a painful reality, personal growth will come with personal grief. Because as we grow, we will outgrow some areas of life. And that might be relationships, it might be environments, it might be opportunities, commitments. And, part of our self-restoration and becoming the greatest version of ourselves is to allow change to happen because the only constant in life is change. And one of the greatest life skills is to be able to embrace change and honor ourselves. And as we move out people and environments and opportunities that no longer fit the version of us today, we open up space for new relationships, new experiences, and new opportunities to come into our life that better suit who we are. And that's a beautiful thing. But when you're still at the place of kind of moving out the things that don't fit for you anymore, and you don't yet know if those wonderful things are going to come in, it's terrifying. This is where we come back to that trust in ourselves that no matter how this all plays out, we're going to be okay because we have our own back, because we trust ourselves and we know what we deserve.
That reminds me of this little analogy that was shared with me when I was quitting drinking, but it's really applicable to personal growth as well, which is that we are like puzzle pieces. And when we change, we shift our shape. And then the other puzzle pieces in our life either have to shift their shape so they still fit, or it's time to find a new puzzle.
Right. Yeah, that's a really great analogy.
Dr. Ashley, this has been such an incredible conversation. I feel like I not only understand this relationship dynamic better, but also understand the path to healing better. And that is not only hugely valuable to me, but will be so, so helpful to people listening. Here at Season of Stuck, as we near the end of our interviews, we just have a few questions that we like to do. So if it's okay with you, I just have a couple more questions for you.
Yes, please.
Okay, question one. Thinking of your ideal future self, like the future Dr. Ashley that you are working every day to one day grow into. If she could travel back in time and talk to the current version of you, what advice do you think she would give you on how to get unstuck at this point of your life?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, I would say this is advice I lean into within myself on a regular basis. Keep choosing yourself, keep choosing your standards, and keep saying yes to the things that excite you but scare you. Because what I have learned in my own personal journey of making incredibly brave choices that scared the you know what out of me, I was able to open up space for some of the most magical things to come into my life that I couldn't have even fathomed at the time. But because I worked on what I believe I deserve and am worthy of, guess what? Really amazing things have come into my life. And so I would tell myself today to keep choosing myself, keep being brave, keep saying yes to things that excite me but scare me, because that's the secret to beautiful, soulful, fulfilling living.
Keep choosing yourself. I am actually also going to take that advice from the future Dr. Ashley. Thank you
Perfect.
very much. Okay, now the next few questions are just rapid fire. So I'm going to ask a question and you just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay, you got it.
Favorite movie of all time?
Oh, goodness. I'm not a movie person. This is a terrible, terrible question. I honestly, like my brain, I don't even know.
Are you a show person?
Yes. But what is my favorite show?
It's a very heavy question, like, because there's so many different parameters that come into play.
Do I dare admit that I watch a lot of trashy TV? Do I admit that?
Yes.
Like all the Love is Blind, all the dating shows, that's my jam.
When I am feeling stressed, there is no better outlet than popping up some Vanderpump Rules. It's just like,
there you go.
it's,
See? It's
yes,
wonderful.
there's something about it where you can just kind of like shut your brain off and it's like actually very restorative.
Totally. Yes. And getting out of your life for just a little bit and just plopping into someone else's, I don't know, there's something very therapeutic about it.
I agree. And knowing that that comes from a therapist, I will use that as a permission slip to continue watching trashy TV.
That's right.
Okay, go-to coffee order.
Oh, goodness. Grande Americano.
Nice. If you could have any animal in the world as a pet, what animal would it be?
Well, I would have a pet deer.
Mm.
Can I have more than one? Because I would also have a pet bunny and probably a pet raccoon.
Oh, that sounds like such a great assortment of animals. We live in the Pacific Northwest and there are a lot of deer in our area. And just recently, the deer started having their babies. So there's just a bunch of baby deer running around our neighborhood and they are the cutest. Like, I know you can't cuddle them, but I want to cuddle them.
I would. Yes, I know. They make my heart so happy. So, yes, that would be my number one pick.
Okay. And then last question. Best concert you have ever been to?
I am a big Dave Matthews Band lover. So I've been to many of them, love them, hands down my favorite concert.
Okay, Dr. Ashley, we are kindred spirits. I saw Dave Matthews Band every summer for 15 consecutive years.
Oh, okay. Well, you've got me beat. That's amazing. Yeah, it's on my bucket list to see him at the Gorge.
Oh, he is just their performance, and they're all such incredible musicians. That is one of my favorite shows. I'm going in August.
Oh, I'm so happy for you. I would love to be there.
Oh, I love that that's your answer. I love meeting other Dave fans.
We're good people.
We are.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Ashley, again, this has been such an enlightening and supportive and helpful conversation. And I know that there are going to be so many people listening that hear themselves in this story and get the insights and support they need to get themselves unstuck, both in their relationships and personally in the things that they personally struggle with. If anyone listening wants to connect with you or learn more about your work, how can they do that?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at drashleysouthard.com. I post almost every day, and I do a lot of content to try to make sense out of the nonsense and really kind of take away the confusion of what the heck is going on here. So join me there. We have an incredible community of women who are figuring all of this stuff out and becoming self-restored. And you can also head over to my website, drashleysouthard.com. I have resources there. I have on-demand masterclasses. I have toolkits, lots of resources to help you through your own journey of figuring this out and becoming the version of yourself that you were always meant to be.
Amazing. Again, Dr. Ashley, thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it.
Thanks, Deanna. It was so fun.
That's it for today. A huge thank you to our guests for their incredible insights, and a huge thank you to you, our listeners. We know that there are so many podcasts out there to choose from, and we are just so grateful that you chose ours. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider recommending the podcast to a friend or family member that you think would enjoy it. And to make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. And while you're there, if you loved the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review. It plays such a huge part in getting this podcast out to a wider audience and ultimately supporting more people on their journey from stuck to unstuck. And to keep in touch and access even more stuck-related content, follow us on Instagram at Season of Stuck and visit our website, seasonofstuck.com, where you can sign up to get episodes delivered directly to your inbox. Thank you again for being here. It is so, so appreciated. Until next time, I'm Deanna deBara, and you're listening to Season of Stuck.